Hi there. The stream just died on me, and so I'm resetting this Q&A. Let's see if it goes through. It looks like it was my network over here, so I plugged in a Cat5 cable, and so I won't have that problem like I did just a moment ago. All right, so I was answering a question just a few minutes ago. This was from Dawn, and it's about Matthew chapter 15, verse 34, that Jesus was on the cross and he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And the teacher that Dawn was listening to referred to 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, "For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him," to show that God the Father and Holy Spirit forsook Jesus so that God would never forsake us. So the teacher that you were listening to decided to use 2 Corinthians 5:21 in conjunction with Matthew 15:34 to try and enforce his belief concerning the Trinity. All right, that's effectively what this guy did. So the question is let's see, it's dividing God into three people. That's the only way I can see this working, for God to turn his back. This is just simply a distorted view of God, in a sense. So I do agree with that. I can't help you too much with that one. Let's see. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 25, Jesus had just stated that a house divided cannot stand, when they accused him of casting out demons. And so I think your concern is that if 1/3 of the Trinity, which in this case represents three different persons, which from my point of view, if you have a different person, you got a different God, because God is by definition a person. So in this case, you've got a division, whereas the Son is set aside from the Father and the Holy Spirit, and this could be a division of the house, and there could be concern with regards to this. I suppose that you could look at it democratically and say, well, it's 2 out of 3. So the Father and the Holy Spirit won the vote, I guess. There are many different ways of exploring this, but see, that's the problem, is that you've got a speaker who decided to use a verse for a purpose that it was not intended to be used for. 2 Corinthians 5:21 was not intended to be used for this purpose, and neither was the event of Jesus dying on the cross and referring to Psalm 22. And so the distortion that he has created leads to all kinds of additional questions and issues. It just isn't going to fit. It just isn't. Eventually, when you finally get to it. All right, so that's Matthew 12:25. Okay, you said, I thought I once heard you say 2 Corinthians 5:21 is better translated, "He made him that knew no sin a sin offering for us." That may be a better translation. I'm not the one who said that. Somebody else said that. I don't know if that would be the case. If it was, I don't think it would make much of a difference, because to me, the objective is to declare that we have a right standing with God. All right, that we are right with God. Let me see here. Number 4, and when Jesus says, my God, wasn't it to point the Jews to Psalm 22? Yes, that was the case. All right, so no, there's nothing in the archive on this. You asked about that. I hope that I answered this well enough. Okay, next question. This is from Valerie. Please give us an orientation to how Augustine and later Luther, Calvin, and the Reformation indoctrinated the church with Gnosticism, and its insistence that mankind is unable to resist sinning since we inherited Adam's original sin of disobeying God, leaving us fully depraved, slaves to sin, without free will from conception. Okay, now, Valerie, I'm not going to be able to address this in the context of Gnosticism And I don't think I'm going to do very well with addressing this topic on us being so in such a condition that we're fully depraved and that we don't have any choice otherwise. I'm not going to be able to speak well about this because it's been a long time since I've studied the doctrines of Gnosticism and those that are related to this, because not all Gnostics believe the same thing. So this is just this has got additional this kind of a question is asking for additional details that it's been way too long since I've explored this, and it's unlikely that I'm going to do it anytime soon. This is just not going to really be my area of expertise. I can see that that my life is pretty well planned out for the next 5 years at least, kind of thing. 10 years even. I don't see slipping this in there. So I'm not going to try to speak about something I just don't know as well as you're asking me for. Let's see. As such, mankind must always seek atonement. Please explain how that indoctrination is a contravention to our having and thus able to exercise free will to obey God or not. Okay, the closest that I can get to for this kind of a question is to say I think it's relatively obvious that we have free will. I think it is. As for myself, I call this willful voluntary behavior. So whether a person decides to engage in sin or they decide not to, it's willful voluntary behavior that a person can choose to do one or the other. And so that in and of itself, to me, it's self-evident that this philosophical belief just doesn't have any validity. So it must be based on some other philosophical belief that obviously doesn't have any validity either. That's where it usually ends up. You say, well, okay, well, if this is the kind of thing you believe, why? Well, it's because of another belief that you have, and that one was false too. So you end up having to really dig deep in order to find, okay, where did it come from? From what group and who and why and where did it go? And it's not really it's not really valid anyway, and that's pretty self-evident. So I would just let it rest with that and just walk away. I would. But at the beginning, you asked about the orientation and how Augustine, Luther, Calvin, and the Reformation indoctrinated the church with other stuff. I can address that, and where that comes from is it comes from the kind of question of if there is a God. That's in general, that's where it comes from. It comes from this question of, well, if there is a God, and then people start to derive or they start to define their theology, their study of God from there. That's their study. Their study is asking the question, if there is a God, well, then let's have a discussion about that. Let's have an examination of that. Let's see what other people before us have written about this in their conversations and discussions that they may have had. If there is a God, then, well, we would expect that this is how God needs to be. And then there's all kinds of issues like, well, if he's not like that, then there's consequences. That's where this kind of stuff comes from. Now, historically speaking, Calvin got all of his stuff from Augustine. He said that, right? And Augustine told us where he got his stuff from. He got his stuff from Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, And I still have this friendly bias that goes along with one of the other great philosophers, Vincini, who said Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, morons. So if you know what movie I'm quoting from, then you'll be able to laugh with me. But that, these guys, that's what they did. They sat around, and I call this campfire theology, where they sat around, they discussed, well, if there is a God, well, what would he be like? All right. Well, they came up with these definitions, this list of qualities that they said that this is, if there is a God, then this is who he's got to be. Well, this was a long time ago, a long time before Christ. And the Greeks, they embraced this kind of theology as their foundation for their theological pursuits. That's what happened. And this was the basis, or part of the basis. There were a lot of different approaches, a lot of different people who came at this from different topics that established the foundation of what's called paganism, otherwise known as Greek philosophy. All right, and so Greek philosophy was established in this way, and as far as I know, the first person of prominence who really wanted to do something with this philosophy was Alexander the Great. From what I understand, Alexander, he wanted to conquer the surrounding nations, and he tried to assimilate them together under the common belief of pagan Greek philosophy. The attitude was, well, maybe we can bind everybody together if they have the same philosophical beliefs. Sorry, I keep tapping the microphone. I may have made some bumping sounds or something in the audio. So I've moved my hand not to do that anymore. So this was a pursuit of Alexander the Great, which of course did not work out, but it was something that he thought he might be able to try, that he thought he might be able to do. It was Antiochus the fourth, or the third, I think it was the fourth, the guy who established decrees on Israel, and asserted that Israel, the nation of Israel, the Jews who were in that region at that time, that they would have to abandon Judaism and embrace pagan Greek philosophy. So he decided to try to do what his grandfather, I'm pretty sure it was his grandfather, Alexander the Great, had tried to do. Sorry, I'm a little bit, it's been several years and I've been very busy since then, but I can tell you where to find the details that I can't remember. And that's in the series that I recorded on Hanukkah, which was recorded like 10 years ago. Right? But in there, I think it was Antiochus IV. I didn't mention Alexander the Great, but this, at least I don't think so. But this is what was motivating him to try and get the Jews to embrace pagan Greek philosophy, though, so they could be assimilated better within his little mini empire. And he was doing that because he was trying to get everybody to participate in collecting gold that he needed in order to pay off the Romans as part of the Treaty of Apamea that his father had to sign to end the Roman and Greek wars. So there's a lot of history with this, but in this case it had to do with wanting to raise more money. And he thought, well, if we can get everybody together philosophically, like his grandfather Alexander tried to do, or at least was thinking of trying to do, maybe this can work, And people like this, they have this belief that, well, I'll try it. And if it doesn't work, so what? I'm the king. I'll send somebody to go clean up the mess and we'll try something else. They don't ever deal with any consequences. That's what the people have to deal with. They don't deal with the consequences. They just issue the orders, issue the decrees. The Jews there, this was what started the Maccabean Wars. The Jews fought a war over pagan Greek philosophy. They did not want this to be a part of their lives because clearly this is not the God of the Bible. All right. So that's my first exposure to this was the issue that, well, this is what the Maccabean Wars were fought over. And then what happens? I go into the Christian world, right? Yeah, I go into the Christian world. I get saved, and I go in the Christian world, and I find out, I had no idea, but I find out that for just about the entire history of Christianity, the overwhelming majority of the people in the Christian world have embraced pagan Greek philosophy. What the Jews fought a war over. As if that's God, No, it's not. No, it's not. It just isn't. All right. So that's what's happened, and that's what's taught in, as far as I know, every theological seminary around. You want to pass your seminary classes. You want to get endorsement from these people. You got to believe this kind of nonsense. So that's that's as best as I can do. I can tell you to look in those places, and at the rest of these details, as for myself, I just have to walk away. I have to walk away because I have so many other things that I have to do. The Lord has given me other work to be involved in. Okay, the next one is with relevance to a parent who has a teenager, all right? And this is really interesting, and I'm going to answer this question because there's a lot of people who deal with this. And it's interesting that this person decided to bring it up, but they of course, they don't want me to let anybody know who they are, and I can understand that. But this is an interesting scenario. What you've got is you've got a parent who recently got off antidepressants, or within the last maybe 5 or 10 years, I'm guessing. And so the parent got off of antidepressants, and they struggled. It is a struggle to get off of that. They had to get onto some other kind of drug to make a transition off of the antidepressants, and then they were able to get off this other drug. But what's important to recognize, first of all, is that there are some serious addictive properties relative to this. And when a person stops taking medication, there can be all kinds of physiological consequences related to this. So the parent knows more than enough about this, more than I know, because the parent lived it. They really did. But now one of their children has been having an interest in getting on some of these antidepressants, and apparently the teenager is doing just fine. They got a job. They go to the gym. They're active in school. There doesn't seem to be any reason for them to get on any of these drugs, really. Nothing profound, And but what's happened is that they have a friend. Okay, they have a friend who is taking these drugs, and the friend has suggested to the teenager of this parent that it'd be good for them too. I think that's the scenario. That appears to be what's happened. All right. So the first thing I'm going to address is the friend. Let's start with the friend. Okay, you got a friend who's definitely loaded up on these drugs, and okay, maybe they're benefiting in some way, maybe they're not. Not really. I can't say anything about that. But regardless, for them to suggest that somebody else get on these kinds of things, all right, well, that's really not their role. That's not their place. Okay, this is supposed to be the decision of the parent. All right, that's the parent's decision. It's not some doctor's decision, even in this kind of a context, I don't think. So you've got this other teenage kid who is who's making medical suggestions to this other kid, right? Now, I'll tell you, one of the reasons why this could be taking place is because the kid the friend who's on these drugs wants to feel like it's okay. Maybe they're starting to think like maybe it's not okay for them to be doing this, and they're trying to recruit someone else to be on these drugs too, so that they can feel like what they're doing is fine because somebody else is doing it. And the teenager of the parent has got this friend who is encouraging them to do something, and it could be just simply motivated by something like that. All right, the idea that maybe that would help them. Okay, well, maybe they're struggling with something. Maybe they're feeling a little bit depressed. Well, it's good to be depressed if there's something depressing. All right, I mean, if there's something depressing in life and you don't feel depressed, I would be concerned. I would be. There's lots of circumstances in life that are very depressing. I can tell you many of them in my own life, and I'm thankful that I get depressed over depressing circumstances. I am, and I'm thankful that I can have joy in joyous circumstances. Okay, I don't want to disrupt that. I don't see any purpose or any value really in disrupting that necessarily. But you got this other kid who's saying, no, we can just do drugs. All right? Okay, so the teenager is being influenced by someone of this nature. Now, the teenager needs to use this as an opportunity to realize that there are some people who you want in your life, and there are other people you just don't want in your life, okay? And this friend is not the kind of friend you really want to have in your life. In my opinion, you just need to go and find some new friends. All right? For someone to be like this, I would suggest it's time to go find some new friends. All right? When you think about what the parent has had to endure in order to get off of these drugs, doesn't that give you an indication that it's maybe not such a good idea to get on these drugs? Seriously, this to me is an indication that you don't want to get on these things. Just because you have some doctor or some official who makes it legal doesn't necessarily mean that it's really in your best interest or it's really good for your health. There are all kinds of side effects, all kinds of consequences that nobody ever really pays attention to until, of course, after they happen, And there are some real, I've read a lot of the side effects that have been discovered from various medications, drugs that people are taking, and some of those side effects are really serious. Oh yeah, and they're permanent too. You take one of these things and then all of a sudden parts of you just don't work anymore forever. And I would consider that to be a concern. But no, other people think, let's just take drugs. Okay, I know this, I'm trying to find some humor in this, but seriously, it's a serious problem. Now, there's something else I wanted to mention by looking at this. Okay, so my suggestion is simple to the parent: be the parent, and don't worry about what other people might think of you or what they might say about you, and definitely don't participate in this. Now, from what I can tell, your teenager is going to be of age soon, and they'll be able to make these decisions on their own. And if they really want to press the issue, then that's what you do. You just simply assert, well, look, until you are this old, or while you're in my house, or whatever you want to establish as the baseline, you just simply say, look, as long as this is the situation, just say, look, I'm not going to be a part of this. All right? Just say, I'm not going to be a part of this. Especially if you've been through it yourself, you know more than anybody. Nobody should be telling you otherwise. You know about the struggles, and so you just stand firm and say, look, I am not going to be a part of this. I'm not going to endorse this. I'm not going to help you get these drugs. I'm not going to take you to some person who's going to say that this is now going to be a part of your life. You just don't be a part of it, and just make it clear to them, look, if you feel that you really need to do this, then you're going to have to wait until you are legally able to make your own decisions concerning this, and under those conditions, I will respect those decisions to the extent that I'm not going to get in your way. But on the other hand, I may not want you living in my house either. You may have to be firm to that extent, that you're just going to have to do these somewhere else. I don't care if they're legal or not. That's not going to happen in my household, especially as it may influence others who are there in the household. This is a serious matter. Okay, now I said all of that in order to say something else. The something else is that there are disruptions right now going on. There are a lot of disruptions taking place in our supply systems and in our medication systems and stuff. There are shortages of all kinds of drugs in all kinds of places. They're starting to show up. They're here and there and everywhere. They're beginning to take place. All right. So what happens when people can't get their drugs? All right. Anybody thinking about that? What happens if you can't get your drugs? Either because they're just not physically available, or maybe you can't afford them anymore, because life changes. The government isn't going to pay for the prescription. You may not be able to pay for the prescription. What are you going to do then? If you have this kind of a serious addiction to something, and then all of a sudden you don't get your pills? I mean, come on, people. This is exceptionally serious. The side effects, the withdrawals, the consequences related to all this is just, I don't even want to try to admit myself, and I have nothing to do with these things, but I just don't even want to go there. I'll let you know, you can go there. That's where you go. You go there and consider, what's going to happen when you can't get these things that you never really needed to begin with, but now you do. What are you going to do? And think about your neighbors too. What are they going to do? And the people down the street, or the people you're going to meet in the supermarket. People are going to go nuts. A lot of people are just going to have some serious psychological problems when they can't get their drugs, right? I'm concerned about this. I'm watching this. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'm not, I am no prophet, but I'll tell you that this is something that might become a topic in the next 2 or 3 years, maybe earlier. I don't know. But I don't see anybody, paying attention to something as serious as this. And I think there should, I think people should start to have some conversations about this. All right. Leah in Caledonia, Ohio. What are your thoughts on women's roles in the church? Could not find that you had a sermon addressing this. That's right. I don't have a sermon addressing this. What am I going to say? Women's role in the church. What am I going to say? I don't think I could I don't think I could do a sermon on this. I don't think I have enough material to be able to do a sermon on this. This is pretty simple. It's pretty quick. I don't think that that the general roles in the church necessarily have to be gender related. In general, I was fortunate to be able to pastor a church for a long time. And the ladies who were in the church there, they did things just like the men would do, and the men did things like the ladies would do. And the ladies had, I think, in general, they had more leadership kinds of roles than the guys did. Nobody thought anything of it, But now, see, I was very fortunate. I had a relatively mature group of people, mature in the faith. So there weren't any real obstacles to think about when it came to any of the ladies that were in the church that I was pastoring. So there was never any question about whether you're a woman or a man when it came to the role. There was one thing that did surface now and then, and that was when there was a conflict. All right. Now, not if, but when there is a conflict in a congregation, in a church, a conflict of some kind, such as somebody needs to move on to another church, something like that. It's just my general opinion, my feelings that that this is the kind of thing for a man to do, to resolve a serious conflict of this nature. That I wouldn't want any of the ladies to have to engage in a conflict of this kind of a nature. So that's just my feelings concerning this. And in the church that I was a part of, I'm pretty sure I handled just about all of the serious conflicts and did those really, really fast and really decisively when the situations finally got to the point where I could really execute some serious issues. So when it comes to the subject of resolving conflicts, I have a bias, I just don't. I don't really feel that would be a woman's role to send her in to battle, Okay, so that's how it goes. I use the illustration sometimes of if you were to imagine now my orientation in my house over in this direction is Kansas out there. I'm in Colorado. and that direction is Utah. But I like this direction because in order to get to Kansas, you got to cross this vast desert. All right, in order to get there, so I use this illustration sometimes. I thought about, well, imagine that there is this great barbarian horde, these savage barbarians who are coming from Kansas because they have decided that they are going to seize the Front Range of Colorado. They're going to come and take over Denver and Colorado Springs and Pueblo, and then maybe Fort Collins too. But they are coming, and they are motivated. All right. I mean, they really want to conquer and kill and destroy, and it's going to be scorched earth as necessary, and it just doesn't matter because they just want everybody dead, and then they're going to bring their people over here and resettle the area and start from a clean slate. So what do we do? All of our families in our neighborhoods, we all get together, and we decide that the guys are going to stay in the homes with the kids and make sure the kids have got food to eat, and change diapers if necessary, and put them to bed on time, and keep up with their education and stuff. And we're going to send the ladies out into the desert to meet the barbarian horde that is soon approaching. And these ladies, they'll take care of those savage barbarians. Is that really what's going to happen, folks? Really? And your ladies might be thinking, yeah, that doesn't sound so equal. We want 50% guys. Still, all right? Look, still, okay? I don't see that that ladies should have that kind of a role in the church to deal with the inevitable conflicts that will erupt. The church is just simply a family of individual families, and there's always conflict within a family, and somebody has to solve, well, we would hope that somebody would solve those conflicts. And others would not get in the way of there being a solution, But when you've got families of families, now you got bigger dynamics going on, a lot more, and a lot more to deal with. Okay, now there are some statements by the Apostle Paul concerning women teaching in the church, and that he just does not let that happen. He doesn't want that to happen and stuff like that. And there is a circumstance when I can agree with Paul, all right? So this is the one exception that I think that it would become a topic, all right? This exception, let's just assume that tomorrow, or maybe even after I'm done with this, maybe, like an hour from now or something, somebody gives me a call and you say, Aaron, I got some great news. Yeah, whenever I hear that, great news, huh? From whose point of view? I got some great news. There's a synagogue that just decided that they're all going to believe in Jesus as the Messiah. They actually decided to answer the question, how would we know the Messiah if we saw him? And what have the prophets, who we say are prophets of God, what have they had to say that would help us to be able to know the Messiah if we saw him? And so they decided to actually look into that. And when they did, they realized that the only person in the history of humanity who could ever qualify to fulfill all that the prophets have had to say is Jesus. Especially the prophecies related to, to dates. I mean, there's some of them that are dated in the sense that it's going to happen within a certain time period, and that time period is long past. Jesus was the only one during that time period who could have qualified. He was the one. And so we've got the synagogue of all these, Jewish folks who decided that they recognize, okay, Jesus is the Messiah. That's nice. Well, but they're not sure how to make any adjustments, if they need to make any adjustments. What does that mean now? What does that mean? They know that there is a new covenant. All right. According to the prophet Jeremiah, a new covenant has been made between God and the house of Israel because he remembers our sins no more, and that's what Jesus did. So, all right, we got to find out what this new covenant is and why and how it relates to the old, and what is the difference between living by the flesh and living by the inheritance. All right? And when I mean living by the flesh, in this case, restraint of the flesh, we would think. All right? But it turns out that most Jews are living for the indulgence of the flesh. Most, all right, are living for the indulgence of the flesh, not the restraint of the flesh anyway. So you got a real package to open here when you want to say to me that you got a synagogue who now says that Jesus is the Messiah. So they call me and they say, Aaron, we'd like you to come by and maybe work with the congregation for, 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years, and just, get us going, just get us adjusted. Okay, well, I'll tell you, the first thing I would do, absolutely, without question, the first thing I would do is I would tell the people, look, here's the deal, all right? You want me to do this? Really? Now look, I have been in many, many synagogues, all right? I've been in a lot. I understand that most people have no idea what my real history is, and I'd rather it not be known in many cases. But I got a good list, of at least, 25 to 30 synagogues that I have been a part of in my life, somewhere around there. I say somewhere between 25 and 30. And I think that's enough, different parts of the country. I'm trying to remember. I don't think that there was one in another country. I think they're all in the United States. So there's some limitations there. But still, from what I know, from what I understand about Jewish households, all right, and of synagogues, all right, this is the first thing I would say. All you ladies, you don't talk in the synagogue anymore. All right? No more. I would. That's rule number one. Ladies are not speaking in the synagogue. All right? They're definitely not teaching the guys. If you ladies got any questions, you wait until you go home and you ask your husband. All right? Without question. Oh, definitely. That would be the law. Okay? If when I say that, out of grace, I would say we're going to invoke a temporary law. You bet. Oh, definitely. Without question. I would definitely require that. And if that was ever violated, I would evacuate. All right? I wouldn't want to have any part of it at all. You ladies don't want to go along with that, then don't ask me. You go find somebody else to deal with that. Because making these kinds of adjustments with that kind of culture and history and background and social skills, no chance. No chance. I wouldn't even try. I would just say, well, you can listen to my radio archive. You want to know what I have to say? You go ahead and listen to that. Just don't let me know. Don't tell me. Oh man, because that is tough. That is deep rooted for generations and generations. So in that case, that would be the one circumstance that I would invoke a temporary law for the ladies' roles in the church. Yeah, without question. So I hope that's helpful. Let's see, what's my time here? I got about 10 minutes before I really should stop. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is about, I answered this person's question, so I'm going to skip past that one. Okay, Jim in Arlington. And Jim, let me take a peek here. I think that, yeah, Jim, I sent an email reply to you. When was this? Yesterday. I sent an email reply to you, and your spam filter blocked me, and so I couldn't get through to you. This is common. This happens a lot. So I'll try to resend this again in a day or so. Check and see if you can add all the email addresses that you have of me into what's called your whitelist, because I do have a problem, especially with let's see, where did this go? People PC, yeah, People PC, which is which is associated with Earthlink. These internet service providers, they just really blacklist me. There's a lot of ISPs that just don't let me get through their servers. And your email, it turns out that they got me on there. They absolutely refuse to even connect, to allow a connection. So anyway, let me go back here to your question. I'm curious about the music. Curious about the music used in the radio ministry, open and close. Okay, the introduction was done by a guy by the name of Marty Getz, and the outro. Several people have found it for him. I don't remember who they are. I think the title of the CD was Lord, and it's a messianic group. And several people have found them. They've figured it out. They do a search on the lyrics and stuff, and they eventually find out who they. And then they tell me. And look, I got no place to write this down. I mean, I just don't. I don't have a place. I mean, I could write it down, but I have no place to really file it and put it to go look for it. It just is not part of my my database, my data structure. I just don't have any place to put it. So I forget it, and it really doesn't matter to me that much, even though they play the music at the end of every one of my broadcasts. So see, what happened was that it was the day of my first broadcast, and I go into the radio station in Denver, and the station is KLTT, and I'm in there. And I got to get my first recording out. I got to get my first broadcast going, and I'm talking with the station manager, Mike, and I say, well, gosh, Mike, I think I need some intro and outro music of some kind. He said, yeah, you probably do. So he pointed to a bookshelf that he had of a bunch of CDs that people had mailed into the station, to maybe the station would play the music or something. And I just looked at the shelf, and in a matter of, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds, I just picked this one, I picked that one, and then I found a couple of songs that seemed like they would work, and grabbed a couple of clips and spliced it in, and, well, they've just been broadcasting now ever since. I've just never given any other thought to it other than that. So I'm sorry, but I don't have any special story of divine revelation or the cloud of smoke and the lightning of fire, that God gave his endorsement that these were the ones to be used. It just wasn't like that at all, right? Nothing. It was just, I just looked at the shelf, grabbed a couple of things, and okay, we're going to do this. And that was it. Okay. Nothing other than that. Okay, the guy who you hear speaking to give the introduction and the closing is a friend of mine that I've lost track of. He finished his PhD in computer science. He was on the Olympic team. I won't tell what sport it is, but just I give him some sense of privacy at least. But so he finished his PhD in computer science. And he was one of my students with one of the classes that I taught, and we worked together in a research laboratory. We worked on different projects. I worked for the Office of Naval Research and DARPA, and he worked for somebody. He was doing research projects for somebody else. So we worked together at the university, and he's got the perfect voice from my point of view. So I asked him if he'd do that for me, and he's a Christian, to an extent. I don't know, I don't know how far, but it was never really a big subject between he and I. He graduated and then he got work at Google. What he did was he designed the voice verification instructions for the Google glasses to authenticate a person by their voice, to be able to identify a person from a security point of view, voice verification. He did PhD research for that and went to go work for Google, but apparently it didn't work out very well. I think he's back in Denver. I don't know, but it'd be nice for me to get connected with him again. And it was kind of funny. I got to tell you, a little over a week ago, I was having dinner with the number 2 guy for Salem Media. There's the owner who just handles all the ownership issues, and then there's the other guy who decides what ministries are going to broadcast where for Salem Salem Media, which is the largest Christian broadcasting network in the world. And he and I was over at his house and we were having dinner a couple of weeks ago. And he had mentioned, he said, you could also maybe think of it, because he's making all kinds of suggestions, stuff that it might very well work, but I just can't get to it in terms of how I might be able to increase funding. And because he's always telling me, Aaron, I want you on all of my stations. I say, but I don't have any money. So I can't take it. I can't take those spots. Anyway, he had mentioned, he says, your outro, your closing, you could maybe change it to, Charles Stanley, that's what he quoted. He said, Charles Stanley, who has 20 times the amount of funding that you have. It's 20, I think it's 20. Yeah, it's about 20 times the amount of funding. And, I thought about that a little bit later. I thought, that sounds about right. I would say that I've got 1/20th of the Christian world. That's my niche, of those people who don't want to live by repent and obey, and then sin, forgiveness, and repent. Of those people who don't want to live that way, for me to say I got 1 out of 20, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Anyway. He said, you ought to change that. Charles, he's got this one, and he's getting 20 times the number of donations that you're getting. Why don't you have this change a little bit? I said, yeah, but Chris, I don't know where to find the guy in order to change my outro. I don't know where to find him. I don't know where he is. I lost track of him years ago. So I can't change that. I gotta find a whole new person, a whole new voice. They're gonna have to do the intro too. I'm gonna lose the guy. I like him. Oh, yeah. So anyway, that's that question. I thought, okay, I'll have some fun and answer that one. All right, one more. Let's see if I can try this one. Doreen in Rockwall, Texas. I think this is kind of a part of Dallas. Actually, I think this is a bigger question than what I thought. How much time? I've only got 3 minutes on the clock. I might need to make a note and try for this a little bit later, Doreen. And thank you for your email recently. That's really meaningful, and if you can help with that I mentioned, please do. But look, you're really new to my work, so I want you to know I feel a little awkward about you being so supportive. I just do. I think you should spend more time. Find out what are all my little weird things, and what are the things that you can discover that you just don't agree with. I just feel a little awkward about that, or shy, I guess is maybe the word. At any rate, you ask, on forgiveness and salvation, did Christ die for the sins of people who had died long before he came? People like Adam, Eve, Noah, and all those people who perished in the flood. Are they forgiven as well? We don't have enough information to really know for certain how that would play out. I can only give you what I go on that gives me some sense of understanding on how all of this works. In the Mosaic Law, when many of the sacrifices were spoken of as the means by which a person would obtain atonement, the Lord added, as part of the sacrifices, he would say, the sin will be atoned for and they will be forgiven. And that's a future reference. It's to say that they're going to be forgiven, but not necessarily at the time when the sacrifice is performed. And so when I study the Mosaic Law and I see those few references concerning the future of real forgiveness, they will be atoned for and they will be forgiven. That means that there's two separate ideas. And I did a radio program on this, the radio programs Atonement and Propitiation, that they're in the archive. They should be just right above the Forgiveness series at the beginning of the second section of the radio archive, where I talked about the differences between atonement and propitiation. It's part of the Mosaic Law, that the Mosaic Law describes atonement as one thing and forgiveness as something else. To say that atonement means that the sins would be covered over, but at a future date they would eventually be forgiven. So with that, I kind of have the bias that says that that everyone in the world before Jesus, they also were in effect forgiven, that they also experienced forgiveness for their sins. But that was more for God than it is for us, believe it or not. I know that there's a lot of pressure to say that, we just really need God to forgive us. But it's not just that. It's also that God needs to forgive us. He needs to get this done. He needs this forgiveness issue resolved. For him to keep records of everybody's wrongs, that's a burden. That's a job. More than even one angel could do. There's a lot involved to keep track of everybody's sins, especially the abundance of them. So for him to be free of the whole subject, to me, is a bigger deal than for us to be free of the subject. But that's not salvation. All that does is resolve the sin issue. The salvation question has to do with the restoration of life. And that was the other part of your question. Shall they be saved now that they are long dead and cannot receive the free gift of the Holy Spirit? We do live in a unique time era after the resurrection. We are in this time era between the resurrection and the second coming, whenever that may be. The other people before the resurrection, they would not have been able to be made spiritually alive. So if God is going to give them a place in the kingdom of heaven, it's going to be according to different criteria than being made spiritually alive. We don't know what that is. We don't have that information. We just know that that kind of criteria exists because there's enough information to say that there are people from previous time who will have a place in the kingdom of heaven. We can figure that much out. So there must be some criteria. It's just not been disclosed to us. I have an opinion. My opinion is that that if a person has a heartfelt condition such that they recognize that they will not be able to have a place in God's kingdom without His grace and mercy, and His grace and mercy alone, that it will have nothing to do with their works. If a person can acknowledge that and recognize that, and they know what they can know about their God, or at least to an extent that He feels satisfied, and that it's true, what they know and what they believe is true, then I'm sure, I would guess, that He will find a place to be able to allow them to have a place with Him in heaven. I think that the criteria would be somewhat related to that. But we don't, we don't have enough information to have any certainty with regards to that. Okay, help me understand the events of the end of the world from the rapture of the church to the final judgment and the eternal kingdom. All right, now the period between, and this has to do with the Revelation. Do you have any plans of doing a verse-by-verse study of the book of Revelation? All right, now Doreen, no, this is just not something that God has given me to do as of yet. Maybe someday He will, but from what I can tell, I don't see any indication that this is going to be something that I participate in. That I'm going to be teaching. I don't see that I'm going to be teaching through the Revelation, and I don't see that I'm going to be giving any special unique insights with regards to the time period between what would be considered to be the rapture and the final judgment, the eternal kingdom. Those topics, the Lord has just never given me any unique insights on. He's never spoken to me about these things. So maybe He will someday, but I honestly don't think so, because from what I can tell, I think I'm pretty well booked up. I mean, I'm old now, I'm not gonna live much longer, and there's a lot of things that I see that He would like me to do, and there's a lot of things that I would like to do, and well, it's turning out that most of them I probably won't be able to do. I just won't be alive. I won't be able to make it that long. But looking at those things, I just don't think so. I don't think that's going to be something that I'm going to be a part of. And so for those reasons, I just let those things go. And I'm answering this question for anybody else who may be viewing, and you just need to be reminded. For those of you who send me questions about this particular topic, I'm just reminding you, this is just not my role in the Christian world. I do have a role. I do have a place. I'm useful for other things. This is just not one of them. Let's see. In heaven and hell, are heaven and hell actual physical places? There's a difference between the physical realm and the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm exists, and our exposure is to the physical realm. So does heaven and hell have a physical location? I don't know how that would be described. I really don't know how that could be described, or how that could be charted, or how that could be navigated, how that could be put on a map in a spiritual context, because I don't know anything about the spiritual realm, the spiritual universe that heaven and hell exist in. So there's no way for me to answer that question as far as a physical place. But what I do have confidence in is that no matter what kind of an aircraft I might have, I am confident I would never find heaven and I would never find hell. All right? I'm sure, I just have this sense of surety that if there is an actual location of some kind, my physical being will have no access to it. That's just my personal degree of confidence. That's as far as I can get. All right, folks, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to make a notation to continue from here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I got 4 questions after this one. So thank you for taking the time to be here with me this evening. Sorry about that hiccup. I'll see if I can delete that file. The first upload. It's a hang up with my network, and I will do what I can to fix it. I think I know what I need to do to fix it. The problem is when can I find the 30 minutes to actually do it? I just don't know. I'm trying, but I got other things that I have to do. For example, I got a shelf in one of my cabinets that just broke recently, and one of the hooks in the girls' bathroom came down, put a hole in the wall. I got to put that back together. It's just never-ending flood of all these little things to do. It's really a problem. All right, so thank you for taking the time to be with me in this way, and allowing me to have some part of your life as you can have part of mine. And I will be back in 2 weeks with the live Q&A. I'll be back here tomorrow morning to continue with the next message in the Gospel of John. Thanks.